Hi, welcome back guys, this is your friend, Mr. Fused Fiction Hub, bringing you another amazing story. This is the next part of the story, 2 Feet Short by Garrett Wellist. Chapter 3. There hadn't been a single spare uniform in the supply room. There wasn't so much as a single pair of pants. Toshinori was stuck in his embarrassing attire that he regretted leaving in with every passing minute. Old? Midoriya had suggested they try asking students instead, which was obviously not going to end well either, but it was either that or he tried to see if Chio had anything for him, which he was very strictly against. Not only was she going to beat him, but he was healthy enough for her to no longer hold back. He would be black and blue in the shape of a syringe cane for the rest of his days. He also decided to not tell Torino-sensei. He didn't feel like dealing with the old man on his good days, and his teacher would more than likely find any excuse to verbally abuse him in a way that was slightly more legal, and he really couldn't afford another panic attack. Unfortunately for both of them, classes were now in session. The students had moved on from breakfast and the teachers had finished their meeting. The meeting he never returned to and felt slightly guilty for leaving in the first place. He really needed to get a better grip on his hormones and impulses. Those weren't too good either. Well, since we can't ask anyone, how about we go to the dorms in case someone's sick? Or maybe I have something. Midoriya was starting to lose ideas and it showed. I'm not sure how much I like seeing my own face every time I look down, he teased. But it held truth. Did Izuku have any shirts that didn't have him on it? What? I have other shirts. It was funny how he squealed in embarrassment despite his older age. Do you? Then I guess I'll have to pick from the limited number. He decided that he really liked teasing his boy. His man? No. That was just weird. Izuku only grumbled in response, face already as bright red as it could get without the help of any particularly cute people. Upon arriving to the student dorms, Toshinori took note of the blankets left out on the couches and the few dishes that had been left. They must have been in a hurry. The room was empty but it still smelled like breakfast. A mixture of ramen and rice. Not that rice really had a smell. It looked well lived in, something he couldn't say about his own home. That thought made his heart ache. I don't remember anyone being sick, so I doubt we'll see anyone around here. It's pretty quiet when everyone's away. Izuku walked toward the elevators as Toshinori walked beside him. Right. Izuku had been under house arrest with young Rikugu after their first night in the dorms. Wow, it had been a while since then. So much had happened. Then borrowing your clothes is the best bet. They made the trek up to Izuku's room quite quickly. He shared the floor with young Mineta, Tokoyami and Aoyama. It seemed fitting. Mineta needed to be watched relatively closely but young Ida would likely be too strict and only prove to stress the boy. Tokoyami was well grounded and respected the rules as did Aoyama. They didn't seem like a perfect team, but the two were very passionate and would be the best at keeping both sometimes rebellious boys under control. Izuku hesitated in front of his door. They both knew what was inside and how embarrassing it was. Toshinori had had the pleasure of seeing the boy's room when he visited to ask his mother's view on the dorms. It was on the line of frightening and flattering. He knew well that his boy was a big fanboy and he was prepared to take it all in again. It might be a bit overwhelming. I have a lot of stuff. Izuku was blushing again and rubbing at his neck. I can handle whatever's lurching inside of your room. It was probably better than saying he's already seen it. With a deep breath, Izuku opened the door. He stepped inside and let Toshinori follow him. Everything was essentially the same. Things were placed in different places, given that his room at home was different from here, but the curtains were new. They hung in front of his balcony in their star-spangled glory, just as bright as the posters and bed sheets. He was very glad to see that his face was no on his bed at all. It's not that bad. Izuku physically relaxed at that. I'll get my shirts out. He dug through drawers, sorting through the mess of clothes. Some he hid quicker than others and others were thrown onto the floor. Once he had gone through everything, there was a decent pile of plain clothes on the floor. You can pick whatever you want. I should do some laundry soon anyway. I can just put your clothes with it. It was a sweet offer, but he dreaded having to explain why his boxers were in a basket with Midoriya's clothes. He definitely didn't want to go down that road. Thanks my boy, but is this really my only option? It's not that I don't appreciate the offer or dislike your clothes. Boot to broken bar. He trailed off, not completely sure how to word his worries. Oh, I completely understand. I wasn't really comfortable when Ida and Shoji offered me their clothes either. He gave Toshinori a sheepish smile. Wait, they already know about that? He gestured to Olive. Well, it's kind of hard not to miss when I walk into the bathroom. Only a couple know, though. They called 13 before anyone else could see. Who all knows? Toshinori wouldn't say he liked secrets, but this was something Nezu still had yet to tell him whether to make public or not. Oh, well, Ida and Shoji, obviously, Kirishima, Koda, Kaminari, Sayo, Sero, Bakugu. And Tokoyami. Mineta and Aoyama, they say me as I was walking to the bathroom. He was counting on his fingers to make sure he didn't miss anyone. So all of the boys? Toshinori supplied. Yeah, all of the boys know. Izuku laughed warmly. Where did 13 take you after? Did you just go to Nezu? Sure, he hadn't gone to. Recovery girl checked me out. She was pretty surprised and said she'd never seen it before. She also said to ask you after class but well, you don't look like you'll be teaching today. He would, if he was allowed. He was supposed to teach these kids to be amazing heroes. This little mishap really wasn't much of an excuse, was it? He was honestly healthier than he was on his best days. Right, was his only response. Maybe I should talk to her as well. I don't know anything about this, obviously, so I'm not completely sure why she would ask you to go to me broken bar. She thought it could have been about one for all. Izuku supplied. Nothing like this had happened before, unless it's some unknown sign that I'd never unlocked and you somehow did. Which isn't impossible, just very unlikely. Toshinori went back to looking through the clothes. Oh, right. There might be a few extra uniforms in the gymnasium, for emergencies, like Mirio's case. That would definitely be a good reason to have extra clothes. Let's see then. I'll bring a change of yours just in case. No reason to have to walk all the way back here. He chose a lighter blue t-shirt and shorts. Long pants were harder to fit to a smaller body and he no longer had to worry about showing his sickly thin legs. A broken bar. They made it to the gymnasium without incident. Not a single person was in the hall. He was glad this had at least happened when he'd have this private time to figure out this mess. That privacy didn't last much longer, though. Once they had pushed open the large doors, it was obvious that a class was in session. Lucky for them, the class itself was further away and in combat. They weren't paying any mind to them. Blood King, however, looked their way the second they entered. He frowned and marched over, letting Snipe watch the students alone. What are you two doing here? He huffed. We were looking for an extra uniform. It seems the supply room had run low. Toshinori supplied, saving his student from the much taller man's angry stare. Or maybe it was just surprise. It was hard to tell with Blood King. Instead of kindly showing them the way to the uniforms and keeping him from his own students further, he huffed again. Why did you leave the meeting this morning? That was a loaded question. Not as loaded as some others he'd been asked, but a loaded one all the same. Izuku was also standing right next to him and admitting that he was struggling with controlling his own body was a bit embarrassing, even if the boy had watched him sob right after. I didn't want to distract anyone. It was the basic explanation. Thankfully, Blood King caught the heavy subject and moved on. And you're helping? He pointed to Izuku, who was considerably closer to his height. Yes, there's not much else to do without classes. Izuku looked away. Huffing again, Blood King shouted at Snipe that he would return soon and walked with them to the locker room. To both of their surprise, every boy from Class 1A was in the process of getting dressed at that moment. No one paid Blood King mind, but once they say Izuku and Toshinori, they paused. Those curious eyes made Toshinori wish he could sink away or evaporate into the musky smell of a good workout. You boys still need to get to English. Don't waste time staring. Blood King snorted as a few nodded and returned to their previous dressing. Toshinori hadn't seen so many shirtless males in a while and it reminded him of his years at this school. The locker rooms were a lot smaller in his day and none of the lockers had real locks. You just hoped you didn't get your clothes stolen. Deku. Bukigu's anger seemed to warm the entirety of the room, which was probably just from his quirk. What the bang on the metal lockers interrupted him. Are you doing here? Then, those angry, red eyes floated down to Toshinori and he almost ran. Those eyes were so much more frightening when the exploding teen was taller. What, a broken bar? He was completely flabbergasted. 1A. You have 5 minutes to get dressed and get out. Blood King stared directly at Bukigu as he spoke but the teen didn't look back. They made their way through the room quickly, avoiding all eye contact and didn't dare to look at any more nearly naked bodies. When a pair of legs stepped too close, Toshinori physically covered his eyes. He knew how little boys seemed to care about privacy in that room especially. He didn't want to think of what his students looked like under their clothes as he taught. If he'd ever teach them again. Toshinori only looked up when Blood King shoved the uniform into his arms. This is quite a hassle for some clothes, so don't lose it. The blonde nodded and turned away, going to join Izuku in the main hall again before a surprisingly tender hand rested on his head. Looking back, he caught the 1B teacher's sympathetic look. If you need anything else, just give me a shout. With a nod and a smile, Toshinori left again. He liked the warm feeling in his chest, the feeling that someone cared. Even if he didn't know the hero very well, his students were in very good hands. A broken bar. Meeting with Chio was inevitable. He knew it and dreaded it with every step he took toward her office. She was going to beat him. He knew it. The second he walked into that dreaded infirmary, she was going to beat him with her cane in front of his successor and his life would be over. There was no way he could survive her wrath after the mess he started. Even if he hadn't honestly started it, he hadn't been really beating in a while. The fight at Kamino Ward not counting, Gran Torino never visited him and he didn't visit the old man either. Chio would hit him of course, but it wasn't a real beating. But this one would be. He just knew it. Every step closer felt shaky and his breath came short. He couldn't have an anxiety attack in front of her. That would make the beating worse. Izuku opened the door too quickly, sealing his doom as if he was oblivious to his teacher's fate. His legs went wobbly as soon as he saw the woman who was still shorter than him. But that just made whacking him all the more fun, right? Chio turned around, sighing in frustration as she always did. I swear, Aizawa, if you've gotten another one of your students hurt, I might just have to. She stopped once she saw him. Toshinori prepared, kneeling down and raising his hands to beg for mercy. It was the last hope he had. Chio-sensei, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to turn small. I promise. He was having a hard time keeping his voice from cracking all over the place. When nothing happened, the blonde boy looked up and was met with weeping eyes. What? The nurse waddled over to him, sniffing occasionally and pressed a hand against his cheek. Oh, Toshinori. Her voice made him tear up as well. But he didn't want to cry. Not again. It happened too quickly. Toshinori was pressing against the gentle hand, enjoying the affection too much when her cane came down on his head. He immediately retracted from her hand and covered his head. Another hit came to his side, thankfully now fully healed. Why do I always find you in the middle of every mess? You've been dragging poor Izuku through this with you too. Get up, boy. It was easy to tell that the weepy eyes were gone. They had been replaced with pure rage. A groan stopped them both and Chio sighed. I'm sorry for the noise. She apologized to someone behind a curtain, in one of the many stiff infirmary beds. Who's that? Izuku asked before he could. Poor young Ashido's had it worse this month than usual. Izuku was suddenly fidgety. Is there anything I can do? Don't be silly. She's already taken pain medications and has a heating pad. She'll be fine. You, on the other hand, seem to be off worse. It seems All Might doesn't know anything about this little mess. She turned back toward Toshinori expectantly. This never happened when I was Midoriya's age and I think I'm younger as well. If this was a simple age switch quirk, then I would be 15 and he would be a lot older. Or at least look older. He turned back to Izuku, probably in his 40s, like his master was. That's true. All Might looks around Yuri's age. If this isn't a quirk effect from some other person or even ourselves, then what could it be? Surely we didn't just randomly change age? And if that was the case, then how would we find a way to age back? Would the quirk just continue to randomize our age until it got it right? Why did it hit both of us and why hadn't it changed us when we were supposedly hit? When were we last in the same area? There's no one at with a quirk like that. So it has to be outside of the green-haired male continued to mutter to himself as Chio handed young Ashido a glass of water as requested. My boy, Toshinori elbowed his distracted student's side. Don't look too deep into this. There's too much we don't know to make assumptions. Nezu will contact me when he figures something out. That's what Nezu had told him for reassurance. Izuku looked down and nodded sheepishly. Sorry, I didn't mean to mutter. Chio returned to them, looking older than she usually did. He knew it was his fault she had so many worry wrinkles. You don't have to apologize. I might need to contact Gran Torino, so if you see him, don't be surprised. Now get out of my infirmary. Both boys winced at the thought of Gran Torino walking through to see them. He was, however, the only other person who knew enough about One for All to tell if this was the shared quirk's effect. He's going to get beaten by Torino-sensei for sure. Izuku lead the two of them out and the door was closed behind them. They stood there for a few seconds, not sure what to do now that everything they could do was done. Maybe we can go get some lunch from Lunch Rush? It should be just before the rest of the hero course gets into the cafeteria, Izuku suggested. It appealed to the boy's needy stomach. We can, but I also want you to tell your mother about this. After a few parent-teacher meetings with her, he knew how much she worried, and if she found out about this too late, she would kill them both. Yet another person to beat him. Why did he surround himself with people like this? What? But she's going to cry. She might even come all the way over here. Izuku fidgeted anxiously. She's your mother. She deserves to know about you skipping over half your life. He tried not to think about it too much either. He really didn't want that panic to come back. Alright, I'll call her. Izuku gave in pretty quickly. As they walked to the cafeteria, Izuku pulled out his phone to make the dreaded call. Thanks for listening to this tale. Make sure you comment, like and subscribe and have a wonderful day.